first big project for the course, the analytical summary, I thought it might be helpful to kind of go over some hints and tips for how to write a summary. So first we have to think about what is a summary. An important thing to understand about a summary is that it's an overview and essentially a description of the text. It should always be slightly shorter than the source, although the one that we're going to do for class, because it's an analytical summary, is a complete essay rather than a summary you would put inside of an essay. Summary should be completely in your own words, and it must represent the entire text. So if you're summarizing another text or argument, it's really important that you're not missing anything in that argument. There's a lot of different reasons to use summaries. One of the most important reasons is to demonstrate understanding, because by summarizing a text, you can show that you understand what a text says. As we get into research, this is going to be really important because you're going to be pulling quotes and paraphrases out of larger articles, but it's going to be important to show that you actually read that article, and also essential to give context for an argument. So if you pull a quote out of another article or book, it's really important to be able to explain to a reader where that quote comes from and how that quote relates to the larger text it's a part of. It's also helpful to give an overview of the larger discussion. We're going to talk all semester, and we've already started discussing the idea of beginning with what they say, starting with what is the conversation that's going on. Summaries can give a good way for you to show you understand multiple sources within the discussion. It's also a way for you to compare one source to another within a discussion. And summaries are really, really helpful when maybe you like the idea of a text, or you want to tell someone about the general concept in a text, but you don't need the exact wording or details. So how do we write a summary? The first step is you have to read. I suggest reading the article through the first time just for kind of basic understanding, but then you have to go back and you have to reread, because it's essential that you are not misrepresenting or missing anything. So it's important that you're looking up words that you don't know, references that you don't understand, and it's really important that you're annotating that text and reading actively, that you're searching for and identifying the main claims, and that you're starting to see how that author supports their claims with reasons and evidence. Once you've read and understood a text, you need to sit down and analyze it. What is the main idea? What is that main argument? And then where are the supporting claims and reasons coming in? What kind of strategies does the author use? How does the author progress through the text? Where are the different movements in the text where they shift into a new topic or a new idea? You should be able to write the thesis or main argument of the text you're summarizing. And then you want to make sure that every point in your summary is one of the main details of the text. And you can really only do that by looking at the text as a whole. So number 5 is to outline your draft. A lot of people are just kind of from the hip writers. They just sit down and start typing. But when you're really thinking about a summary, outlines can be very essential to making sure that you aren't missing anything. That kind of goes back to that previous idea of breaking down the text. So if your text has a main argument with 4 subpoints or 4 reasons for that argument, then your summary should follow that and make sure it hits all of those. Summaries are always chronological. Basically, you're going to lead your reader through the text. You can kind of think of this like if you were trying to describe a movie to someone. You wouldn't jump around the movie to different parts. You would start at the beginning and kind of explain the character's path through the movie. So it should follow the organization of the original. And once you have all of that kind of preliminary stuff together, then you should sit down and write. And I promise you, if you've done that earlier work, the writing is going to come much, much easier because you're going to have a better understanding and a better mastery of what you're writing. Now, as it says in our textbook, you need to make sure that you're using signal phrases to indicate that the information comes from a source and not from you. So what is a signal phrase? Signal phrases are some sort of identifying information like the title or the author of a piece and an action verb. So here's a really silly example of how signal phrases work. So in the article here is a good way to describe. The title of the article is Rabbit Season. And then you have the author. So you have identifying information. You know that it's an article, the title of the article, and the author. All of that information is not always essential, but often it can be very helpful to give context. Now, as you're going to notice, signal phrases don't just happen at the beginning of a paragraph. They happen throughout the paragraph. So you want to keep reminding your reader that, hey, this is a summary. I'm still on this other person's ideas. This isn't my point. So as you can see in this short paragraph, the identifying information pops up over and over again to remind the readers that this is someone else's idea. In addition to the identifying information, you need the action verb. And our textbook gives lots of good examples about how to get away from the author says or the author writes. So for here, we want these action verbs to describe the text. So he gives an example of a time. He uses the example to argue. So what we're going to do is we're really going to use those signal phrases to describe the text. This would be a much different paragraph if it just said, Elmer Fudd says rabbits can be pesky. He says about a time when he went hunting. He says that even with all his failures, rabbit season is his favorite time. That would be more of a list summary where you're just giving the points. But by using your signal phrases to describe, by using them more accurately, you can actually give your reader a much fuller idea of what's being said. So things about signal phrases and things about summaries, they should be in present tense. Whenever you're talking about a text, we always refer to that in the present tense. So he gives, he writes, he explains, he uses. Because a text is kind of perennial. It just always exists. So we always use present tense for it. If you were actually talking to someone, like you're recounting an interview you had with Mr. Fudd here, then you could use past tense. But if you're talking about something that was written, present tense. And as you can see in this very, very short little fake summary that I made up, you shouldn't be inserting your own ideas. And those signal phrases keep reminding your reader that, hey, this is somebody else's idea, that I'm giving a summary. So your final steps are these. You want to make sure that you check for quotations. You don't want to use quotations in a summary. You want to make sure that if you're using memorable words or phrases from the original, that those are in quotes. But again, summary should be basic overviews. And then make sure that you revise and proofread. So let's talk about what a strong summary does. A strong summary gives a clear picture of an author's entire argument. It's not a part of an argument. It doesn't skip over the parts that are hard to understand. A strong summary uses signal phrases throughout. It makes clear that all of the ideas belong to an author and not to the writer of the summary. It uses the present tense. It follows the organization of the original, and it's going to use transitional elements that are chronological. And it describes the text. So a summary does not pick and choose what parts to leave out. If you are struggling with an article, you need to make sure that you actually understand the whole article and get the whole thing before you start summarizing. It doesn't use any original wording from the text. It's going to put it all into your own words, and it's not an interpretation, right? A summary should be a neutral representation, not kind of your take on a piece. And finally, if you want to think about what a strong summary is, a strong summary is kind of like a translation. If you have any familiarity at all with speaking other languages, you know that you can't really go word for word in a translation. Instead, you put the original source or the original language into a different set of words so that it actually makes sense. That's kind of what a summary is doing. You are translating for your reader.